Please join me in welcoming our Eric Petersen.
Thank you, Bernie, and thank you for inviting me today. We have a second to find the technology. Okay. Bernie did a, is this better? Okay. Bernie did a good, quick CRS intro. We have an exclusive mission to Congress. It's sort of unusual for me to come and speak to a non-congressional audience. So if it's just, we tend not to always speak the same language. But as Bernie said, CRS is a part of the Library of Congress. We're nonpartisan. We work exclusively for Congress. We provide information and analysis, options, and consequences. We don't make any recommendations. I don't have a particular dog in the FDLP fight. Although I have had the opportunity to speak to some of you in the audience over the years, it's clear this is an area of a great deal of passion. If I could, just who is either from an institution who helps run an FDLP facility or is from an institution that supports one? Is that all? Okay. All right. Well, before we get into the talk, let me do the disclaimer. Because I am from the government, my agency, and more importantly, my oversight committees asked that I point out that my presentation, I'm here in my own capacity today. It doesn't represent views of CRS or the Library of Congress. That said, I think we're just going to kind of jump into it. Those of you who are part of the FDLP program, how many of you are happy with how it's running? There are pieces, thank you, James. Okay, because that's good, because otherwise this could have been a totally depressing talk. But you have neatly taken the first step into the policy process. You've identified a problem, okay? Well, at least one. What are some of the problems with FDLP? This is our audience participation part. Go ahead, James. Agencies are their own publishers. They don't go through the GPO process. This, as other James mentioned, is not a new problem, and it is, I think we can lay a lot of that at the footsteps of INSV Chatta and the subsequent decisions that the Office of Management and Budget did. Just organizationally, the Government Printing Office sits in the legislative branch and is organized under Title 44 of the United States Code to respond to the Joint Committee on Printing. Back before INSV Chatta, JCP could make government-wide policy. Afterwards, it's considered a legislative veto. That's not okay under INSV Chatta. And OMB, the Office of Management and Budget, has basically counseled executive branch agencies, which is pretty much everyone else, to choose or not to work with GPO, and most have chosen not to. One. Any other problems? Yes, sir.
There's a lot of fuss.
I'm sorry.
There's a lot of fuss.
Process, and we're not getting anything. Okay, that's going to be a part of the Congress talk. But yes, that is an issue. Anything else? What in specific?
All the mentions, check-in, and all of that. That's like that. I know we're doing predominantly.
Okay, and my apologies to the tech staff. If I was going to have a conversation with the audience, I probably should have signaled to move the microphones around. Okay, lots of process. Anything else? Anyone else? Yes, ma'am. Okay. Okay, so digitization or not. Anything else? Anyone else? I'm sorry, I apologize. The question, or the response a moment ago was, yet another problem is In addition to the process that we talked about, in addition to some of the institutional stumbling blocks, this most recent one had to do with digitization and then not digitization and then doing nothing with the tangible, the paper-based collection. Yes, sir. Okay. All right, so there are cataloging challenges. There are, forgive me for this ancient reference, cards describing a collection item that does not exist, or if it does exist, we can't get to it anymore. And then there are other things for which there are documents, because let's not forget, a good bunch of the tangible FDLP collection has never been cataloged, that we don't know how to lay hands on them. We could probably go for a while, but let's stop there and just, what are some of the solutions to this? Okay. Do you all agree that those four problems are the problems we need to fix? Are they the only problems we need to fix? No. Thank you. Okay. All right. So we don't have, what we have are, we know there's a problem. All right. We're at step one. We know that there are solutions out there. Okay. But as this brief conversation in any casual walk through the blogs and listservs run and commented in by librarians, we know that there are wide differences in the approach to solving these problems. Okay, so generally, the policy-making process in a democratic system such as ours is to get to consensus would be ideal, at least a majority, something that can get through a bunch of different decision-making theaters, and we don't seem to be there. Okay, once we've got some sorts of sets of solutions, we get to government, actual government. Okay, Congress will do hearings, investigations. They may even write law. Federal agencies like GPO, like NARA, will implement the law as they've been told to, and they'll conduct some internal oversight and external oversight, and they'll just make sure that the program is running as well as it can. And then there's a feedback process. Okay, for the most part, we're going to spend the next bunch of the talk focusing on these first two areas, solutions and where government can get involved and what might need to happen. Some of the problems that we've touched on already, first of all, there's an access and service component, and forgive me, I wrote this report with two very extraordinary librarians who didn't teach me how to speak librarian, but did translate simultaneously. By training, I'm a political scientist and a Congress specialist, so I'm much more comfortable in the how to make the process work piece than I am in the details of what the policy problem is with this. But it seems to me that there's an access and service issue, and to put it mildly, and this is the two components. I know we're mostly talking about Born Digital, but if you get to Congress, they want to know about the giant piles of papers in their FDLP libraries in their districts and states. They want to know how big it is, how many feet there are of them, and what that is. We also have, from the various surveys of FDLP participants, clear indication that some people want tangible, some people want digital, some people want both. Okay? And that is based on user preference, that is based on institutional inclination, that is based on, well, sometimes we didn't ask them what it was based on. Okay? The other thing is costs. We'll talk about that in sort of extensively. I'll go back to my notes. For FDLP, for the GPO, FDLP is considerably less expensive because they're shipping fewer and fewer tangible items. And I'm talking about tangible items, and just to give you a little look ahead, the reason I'm not talking about digital too much through the FDLP specifically is that GPO lacks the authority in this area, or it appears to broadly. But there are costs for GPO to run it. There are costs for participants. On the tangible side, you have what regrettably, from my perspective, didn't get through my review process of the free kitten problem, in which the government printing office sends you a free document if you're an FDLP librarian, and you get the privilege of taking care of the kitten for the rest of the time, buying its food, its litter, and petting it, and letting other patrons come in and rub its ears and make use of it, okay? It is a free kitten, but it comes with some costs, okay? More than that, it's not your kitten, okay? All right? So if you want to put it up for adoption, get something to a new home, you want to put a sign out at the library door that says free kittens, you can't do that under the current plan. So this represents, well, to some extent the costs are capped because there are fewer and fewer kittens coming from Washington. But at the same time, it's not inexpensive, to maintain them for the rest of the time either, okay? FDsys is expensive two different ways. Notes. And first, it is fragile in a way that tangible isn't. Okay? Tangible products come with a 2,000-year record of stability. Okay, words on some sort of substrate go off to a shelf and wait for someone to love them. Okay, we've seen the previous iteration of FDsys, GPO Access, is sort of the first large GPO-based digital information distribution process. It was nightmarishly expensive to upgrade it to FDsys and very complicated and late, as all of these things are. And the problem is we're getting to this, and I've spoken to a couple of you in the last couple of days and have visited with some others over time, is the increasing recognition that while you have the tangible form in one form that's going to sit on the shelf forever, you are likely going to go back and touch the digital collection at some regular interval to make sure that you can always access it through digital means. From the perspective of Congress, that sounds like there could be a great deal of money to be spent there, and so far they've it's been shown that that's right. We don't have a good model for a permanent digital retention model. We have something that we know we're going to have to update. Probably the best example of this that I have comes from, of all places, Major League Baseball, which through 1875 to 2011, the beginning of the 2011 season, had assembled a digital collection, which is largely digitized, of about 1.5 petabytes. And that's everything that they have from old pictures to old movies and video of various games and whatnot, and their pictures have been scanned and all of this. By the end of the 2011 season, they went from 1.5 petabytes to 2.25, because now for every Major League Baseball game, there are 8 digital streams that are collected centrally at their facilities in New Jersey. They are automatically tagged. They're not automatically tagged. They are manually tagged in close to real time as the games play out, so that if something really exciting in the game happens, like a triple play, there's the ability to delve into the records, pull them up, pull up all the examples of other triple plays, pike them back to the stadium where the game is played so the broadcasters can show comparatives. There's all manner of opportunities to identify the advertising on the outfield walls and a variety of other things. And this, as you might imagine, is fabulously expensive, which may well explain why it costs $31 to have a beer and a hot dog at a baseball game. So that's fine, and that's a model that they recognize, but MLB also sees it as an ongoing investment, an ongoing responsibility. And they expect that in every 8 to 10 year time period, they will completely change over their hardware, their networking, their software, and their data formats to stay current with technology. Compare that to other various government initiatives. I'll stick with one that's near and dear to the Library of Congress, Thomas. Legislative Information, which came online in 1995, is substantially the same technology, look and feel as 1995, and is likely to be retired sometime later this year. Not without some efforts over the years to do that before. But in part, one of the things that we ran into was tremendous concern about the cost and the commitment and the ongoing difficulties of keeping attention of those who would fund us and maintaining something that was always available to a very diverse global user base. Another thing, there is little direct funding for FDsys. The way GPO is currently organized, it gets paid when it prints, and it has to make those dollars which it collects from various agencies in return for its printing and other publication activity pay for all of their other work. So in large part, FDsys is kind of financially anyway a side project. And finally, some would argue that FDsys may not be the most user-friendly or accessible of government information facilities. So that's the cost problem. The other problems get into, and James did a wonderful job with the Born Digital materials, and we simply don't know how many there are. Therefore, we don't know how many we've lost or how many we need to go looking for. To some extent, we talk about fugitive documents. To some extent, that term I don't think necessarily covers the potential horror we're facing with this. It's more like they're the missing. And we can't even call them documents at this point. I think I would suggest one thing. I mean, you talk about web pages and documents and the distinctions between those two things and records. I wonder if, because we haven't settled on a counting model, which is another set of challenges, particularly when we're talking about web pages, is the page itself the object, or is the Twitter feed, the Facebook feed, the news releases, and the from the secretary section individual records themselves? I don't know. Or is the stuff behind each link an individual record? We don't know, and I'm not well enough versed in the technology or the potential counting methods to work that out. But it is another challenge. The other thing is, the tangibles, the retention issue, the digitization issues, the consolidation of collections, and finally service, all figure into this mix. We have worked toward solutions. These are examples. I don't really intend to discuss them or, in some cases, relitigate them. But over the past couple of years, the Ithaca report was rejected by GPO. There is a GPO FDLP study in progress. Some would say another GPO FDLP study in progress. Again, take no position on that. At about the time I was writing this report, about 2 years ago, there was the Centers of Excellence and the Digitization Project advanced by CRL. It sounded fascinating. It was a really interesting public discussion, and I wrote the report and I moved on to something else. So I don't actually know how it turned out. If anyone does, I'll be happy to hear about it offline. But for whatever reasons, these solutions either aren't ready yet, as in the case of the GPO study, or didn't come out the way that their proponents had hoped they would in terms of a policy outcome with regard to FDLP. So I think and I've foreshadowed some of this. I think that when we're talking about the program, what is clear is that we've identified tons of problems. We don't have a consensus as to which ones they are, which ones are most prominent, and which we're going to go after. We don't know how to count the materials we're hoping to be charged to preserve. Okay? We don't know how to capture, again. It's really tough to follow you. You know, it's really tough. As you know, how are we going to capture these materials? Who is going to capture them? Is it going to be GPO, FDsys? Is it going to be NARA? Is it going to be the originating agencies? Is it going to be the third parties? Is it going to be some other creation? Is it going to be paper or digital? You know, in the born digital era, we still have tangible users. Under the law, for most, I think all but maybe a couple of exceptions, the expectation is still paper for the official copy, for the authentic, genuine article as the expression of policy. Only examples of that I can think of is at the beginning of this Congress, the House of Representatives adopted a rule that said that reports accompanying legislation, which are required to be available 3 days before legislation can be considered on the floor, can be accepted in digital form. So if they're published on the web, you know, through one of the House's outlets, that is good enough to start the clock. That is the only circumstance in which I can think of the digital manifestation being sufficient and equal to the paper. And I can find a number of quotes for pretty much any of these suggesting that there isn't consensus, but this is the one with regard to whether we're going to go digital or paper. This comes from the National Academy of Public Administration study, GPO, which was required by the House Appropriation, the Legislative Branch Appropriations Bill of 3 or 4 years ago. And this is what they had to say about the FDLP program with regard to digital versus tangible. Why are we having this problem? I think in part because we talked about that feedback loop. The law goes out there, people work it, they implement it, and they see how it's working. Some of the difficulties are that Chapter 9, which means the Federal Depository Library Program, came out in 1962, which is a wee bit before we went to almost all digital all the time. And Chapter 41, Digital Production of the Congressional Record, which is YEL 104, the one James was talking about earlier. 103 is the one that requires the production of certain federal documents in digital form, and that's the Congressional Record of the Federal Register, and the standing up of what eventually became FDsys. That comes from 1993. Again, a bit early days for internet-based delivery. I think there isn't anyone either on the Congressional side, the agency side, or certainly in the FDLP community who doesn't think that these governing capacities are exhausted and not up to the challenge of the information world that we're all faced with now. At the same time, those laws have not changed, and GPO is a good, right-thinking government agency that answers to Congress, follows the law. Okay, and the various assorted legislation or regulations that they have adopted under their own authority. It's not that the various solutions are necessarily bad. It's not that GPO and other government agencies, such as we heard from from NARA yesterday, aren't interested in seeing to it that our government information, our patrimony, is preserved and protected and always available for the rest of time, or the end of the Republic, or whichever term for way long from now you choose to use. Okay, it is they simply don't, in most cases, have the authority when it comes to these digital materials. So, we're back with you guys again. Okay? As a practical matter, Congress is a reasonably busy place. No one's going to bite? Okay. Notwithstanding that there are some concerns about productivity, there are a variety of really hard problems and challenges that Congress faces, okay? And to the extent that they can, they address them, okay? But quite honestly, it is at the end of a long, deliberative process where they have worked with stakeholders who are essentially on the same page about what solutions are necessary, about what problems those solutions will address, okay? And what might happen if those solutions are implemented, okay? To the extent that those various stakeholders, the FDLP community, places like Bernie's shop and the other related professional associations are on the same page, offering clear proposals that are broadly supported, Congress isn't going to engage. Okay? Now, the fact that those standards, those solutions are unclear, and whether they exist, we don't have answers for any of those things. Patience may be in order. Okay? I don't have a better, I wish I could just come up here and there's an answer. If there were, I'd probably be in a different line of work. We probably wouldn't see the enduring discussion. Okay? There is a lot that Congress can do. This is usually where I do the example of national highway system or, I don't know, federal housing programs and the development of the suburbs. But I'm going to take a very local example today and talk about the Chicago River. In 1822, Congress, after a process not unlike what I described, enacted legislation to build a canal because after people paddled up what was to become the Chicago River, it turned out that in rainy season, they all started dying of cholera in rather significant amounts because they were also using the river as a sewer. Figured, dig the canal, everything will get better. They started to dig the canal, Illinois went bankrupt. Okay? Hike up to 1837. Okay? Well, let's try digging the canal. If that doesn't work, let's dig a bigger hole at the mouth of the river and reverse direction. Okay? They tried that. Someone else went bankrupt. It didn't work out. Finally, there was this tremendous rainstorm. It was like 6 inches in about a day and a half. Downstream, 14% of the population of Chicago died from waterborne illnesses. Okay? We're going to do something. We're going to reverse the river. 1822 to 1900, when the river was reversed, okay, is the timeline for this congressional process in which lives were clearly, genuinely on the line. Okay? Thousands of people died in the middle of this. If you give them long enough, Congress will move a river. Okay? At the same time, it may not always get to your particular problem as quickly or as fully as you might like. With that, I think the question was, we're on hold. I think it's more that there's a rule that says FDLP and it just routes it to a different email box. But with that, I am happy to entertain some questions, hear your comments.